My brother turned my life into hell. Then I found out that he slept with my wife, and my son isn't mine. My younger brother, Nathan, has hated me his entire life. If you think it's because of jealousy, you're wrong. I was never the favorite child he was. So, there was no reason for him to envy me. Our mother spoiled him endlessly. He was the golden boy of the family. She cooked for him, did his laundry, and made sure he was comfortable while I had to handle everything myself. On top of that, she insisted that I help him with his studies, simply because he's family. But that sentiment never applied to me. I got used to it, being independent enough to manage on my own. Maybe that was my mistake. I never asked for anything in return. Nathan never helped me, even when I needed it. The only time he ever spoke to me was when he wanted something. I was a quiet, introverted kid who loved studying and minding my own business, while he was a loud, obnoxious copy of our father. I was also brutally honest. I never sugarcoated things. Maybe that's why my mother had such a negative opinion of me from childhood. Nathan was adored by the whole family. I didn't care until he figured out that tormenting me was entertaining. He mocked me for being different, teased me about my height, my glasses. He would sneak into my room and read my personal journal, only to run to our mother and tattle on whatever I had written. When I yelled at him or complained about my privacy being invaded, she just laughed, saying it wasn't a big deal. It got worse. He nearly broke my glasses once. He started messing with my food. One time, he put small rocks in my oatmeal. Luckily, I noticed before breaking my teeth. I told my mother, but she brushed it off, saying, "That's just how brothers bond." Every time we fought, Nathan made sure to hit me where it hurt emotionally. We went to the same school, and he knew that a few classmates bullied me. Instead of defending me, he joined them. He called me a loser, a freak, a pathetic nobody. He even encouraged others to mess with me, claiming I deserved it. One day, during another pointless argument, he told me he wished I was dead. Normally, I ignored his insults, but that one cut deep. At the time, I was struggling with my own mental health. I'm better now, but hearing my own brother say that was hell. Our father was always at work, and our mother couldn't care less. One day, she even yelled at me, saying it was my fault for provoking Nathan. Things escalated. By the time we were in high school, he tried to set my hair on fire. The most shocking part? My mother took his side. She said he was just playing around. Who the hell does that for fun? Luckily, my father finally stepped in. For the first time ever, he acknowledged there was a serious problem. He even threatened to call the cops on Nathan. That was the wake-up call no one expected. Honestly, I never thought my dad would take my side. He always told Nathan how much they were alike because, truthfully, they were. But that day, my father admitted that he had ignored the issue for too long, hoping Nathan was just a stupid kid. Instead, he had turned into a full-blown bully. Hearing that from my dad, I nearly cried from relief. I told him every cruel thing Nathan had done to me over the years, including the bullying at school. My father was shocked. The next day, he stormed into the school and warned the principal that if anyone continued to mess with me, there would be serious consequences. That evening, my dad took me to sign up for MMA classes at the local gym. He told me I needed to get stronger, to learn how to fight back. I won't lie, seeing a bookworm like me in a fight class must have been hilarious. But like everything I did, I took it seriously. I trained every day. Then one day, Nathan pulled his usual crap. He stole my savings, the money I had been collecting from doing chores around the house. I caught him sneaking out, about to leave with his friends. I stood my ground and told him to give it back. He just smirked and said, "What are you gonna do? Run to Daddy?" I don't know what came over me. I punched Nathan square in the face. He looked shocked, then I knocked him to the ground. And then, like the pathetic little brat he was, he started crying, a full-grown teenager, sobbing on the ground. I swear, it was the funniest shit I had ever seen. However, the moment my mother heard her precious baby crying, she rushed outside to help him and figure out what had happened. When she realized I had fought with him, she was first shocked, then furious. She started scolding me, saying that as the older brother, I should be teaching Nathan good values. Meanwhile, Nathan just sat there, enjoying every second of me getting chewed out. She later complained to my father, claiming I had beaten up Nathan and that I needed to be controlled. But my father, for once, was rational. He sat both of us down and demanded an explanation. I told him everything, how Nathan had stolen the money I had worked hard to save. Nathan, of course, tried to justify it by saying he needed the money for a date and that, as his brother, I should have helped him out. My father wasn't having it. He told Nathan that he was lucky all he got was a punch, because if he had stolen from someone else, they might have called the cops. He made it crystal clear that Nathan had no right to take things that didn't belong to him. Nathan didn't like that answer. He threw a tantrum, probably hoping our mother would side with him, but my father was firm. When Nathan realized I wasn't going to be punished for hitting him, he screamed about how much he hated me, then ran to his room and locked the door. From that day forward, Nathan kept his distance. He finally understood that he could no longer push me around. Even worse for him, our father wasn't backing up his behavior anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt like we were on equal footing. Though he could no longer physically bully me, Nathan still tried to get under my skin with words. Anytime he saw me alone, he'd whisper insults, calling me a nerd or a loser. If he needed to tell me something, he wouldn't even speak to me directly, tell our mother to pass along the message instead. I once asked my mother why Nathan couldn't just talk to me himself. She just sighed and told me to be more understanding. At first, I wondered if this was just some awkward phase and that he'd grow out of it. Or maybe he really did hate me. I had always tolerated his words, but eventually, I wanted out. I was sick of the toxicity. I repeatedly asked my mother to arrange a real conversation between us to settle things, but she refused every time, saying she didn't want to get involved. I even asked her why he resented me so much, but she would just brush it off. In the end, I left for college. I had worked my ass off in school, got accepted into my dream university, and even landed a scholarship. My father threw a small party in my honor, and surprisingly, even my mother seemed proud of me. But Nathan? He remained distant. I should have been overwhelmed with excitement for my future, but honestly, the biggest relief was escaping that house. The first few months of college were like freedom. I made friends, loved my classes, and started building a life without all the toxicity. Nathan's verbal abuse was gone, and for the first time, I felt a real sense of peace. By my second year, I met Corinne, the woman I thought was the love of my life. A friend introduced us at a fraternity party, and we clicked instantly. Since I was raised in a religious household, having kids before marriage was completely out of the question. So, when Karen got pregnant in our senior year, we decided to get married right after graduation. Our wedding was small but beautiful. My parents were happy for me, and we had a wonderful time. Back then, I truly believed Karen was my soulmate. I had always wanted a monogamous woman to spend my entire life with. Despite the years and the attention I sometimes got from other women, I never looked elsewhere. I was satisfied with Karen. I never wanted to hurt her. But as the years passed, I discovered she didn't feel the same way. Karen cheated on me twice. Once with a married coworker, an affair that went on for years, starting and stopping whenever it suited her. The other, with an ex-boyfriend from high school when she visited her family in another state. I know some people will call me a fool. Looking back, I won't even argue with that. After both affairs, we separated for a while. But in the end, I forgave her. Why? Because I didn't want to raise a child in a broken home. I genuinely believed we could overcome it. We were young when the first affair happened, so I chalked it up to immaturity and bad decisions. For a while, things seemed fine. I couldn't fully trust her again, but I did my best to push away the doubts. After all, if I chose to forgive, then I had to move forward. It had been 4 years since her second affair, and I started believing I had made the right choice. Karen seemed different. We were happy, planning our future together. Or so I thought. 3 months ago, my entire reality shattered again this time, in a way that made everything before seem insignificant. Karen confessed she had been sleeping with another man for a long time, and then she dropped the real bombshell: her son might not even be mine. The words hit me like a freight train. It felt like the ground beneath me had collapsed, my entire world swallowed in an instant. Shock, betrayal, confusion. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. For a moment, I just sat there, my mind struggling to grasp the magnitude of what she had just admitted. Then, in a daze, I asked her the only thing I could think of: why? Why had she kept this a secret? How could she do something this destructive? Her response? Cold, emotionless, detached. She barely seemed to care about the pain she had just inflicted. Her answers were vague, half-hearted, leaving me with more questions than I started with. I kept pressing her. I told her I deserved to know who my son's real father was. After all, I had been raising him since day one. I had loved him, cared for him, believed he was mine. And then, after a long silence, she finally admitted the truth. It was Nathan. My eyes widened in disbelief. What the hell did she just say? Karen started explaining. She and Nathan had become friends after I introduced her to my family. It all began when she stayed over for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I remembered that holiday season well. Nathan, who was usually cold and distant toward me, had been strangely polite and friendly toward Karen. I had been happy about it. I didn't want Karen to feel unwelcome, so I was relieved that Nathan was acting civil. She wanted to be accepted into my family, so she spent time with my mother, trying to bond. She had noticed how distant Nathan and I were, and even asked me about it. For the first time, I opened up to her about my broken relationship with my brother. I told her that no matter what, we would never be close. Karen seemed to understand, but she took it upon herself to include Nathan in our plans, hoping we'd bond. She started inviting him when we watched movies together. I thought it was progress. We even started talking not much, but considering how he had ignored me for years, even that felt like an improvement. I remember how Karen and Nathan would sometimes play video games together. I didn't think anything of it. Then, she told me how it happened. One night, Nathan had opened up to her about his struggles and a recent breakup. He had been vulnerable, and Karen had comforted him. She admitted that he had flirted with her when I wasn't around, but she never stopped him. And one night, it went too far. I shut my eyes, my brain forcing images into my head that I never wanted to picture. I felt sick. She claimed she had felt guilty afterward and left immediately. That part, at least, made sense. Karen had suddenly insisted on leaving after Christmas. I had wanted her to stay until New Year's, but she kept saying she needed to go home. I had assumed it was just homesickness. Now, I knew the truth. When we reunited at college after winter break, she acted completely normal. I never suspected a thing. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. And now, Karen was telling me she had no idea who the real father was, me or Nathan. She said there was no way to find out since I had already stepped up as the father. She never saw a reason to question it. And then, she admitted the real reason she married me. Between me and Nathan, I was the stable one. I was the responsible brother. So, she chose me. That was why she had agreed to marry me. The world around me collapsed. The son I had loved, the child I had poured my heart into, he might not even be mine. I looked at Karen and asked one final question. Are you still seeing Nathan? She hesitated, then slowly nodded. Karen told me that she and Nathan had always stayed in touch. There had been a natural chemistry between them that they couldn't ignore. She admitted that every time she told me she was working late, she was actually meeting up with him. Half of her business trips? They weren't work. Related, they were secret getaways with Nathan. I couldn't take it anymore. Why did you even marry me? I asked. If you wanted my brother, why go through all this? Karen sighed. She said she didn't want to be the woman who destroyed a marriage. And since she had seen how good of a father I was, she convinced herself to stay with me. She claimed it had been a mistake, that she had been trapped and didn't know how to stop. I took a deep breath and simply said, I'm glad you told me. Then, I turned and started packing my bags. Karen panicked. She started crying, begging for forgiveness, saying I should be angry, should yell at her, should fight for her, anything except this calm, rational response. I ignored her and kept packing. Then, she switched tactics. She brought up our son. How will a divorce affect him? She pleaded. You can't just walk away from your child. He needs you. I stopped and turned to look at her. He might not even be my son. That broke her. She started screaming at me, calling me cruel, accusing me of abandoning the child I raised. But something had finally clicked in my mind. Karen had never believed I would leave her. She had thought nothing could push me away. And honestly, that was my fault. Because for years, I had let her get away with everything. Even though I still had some feelings for Karen, they were mostly tied to the idea that we had a son together and that we had been together since college. She kept insisting that it wasn't too late, that we could fix things. But I couldn't believe that anymore. Even if I somehow forgave her, I would never be able to forget that she had slept with my own brother. I had always believed in second chances, that people make mistakes, that forgiveness is important. But this was beyond anything I could ever accept. I left her crying in the doorway and drove to a hotel. The next day, I went straight to my parents' house and told them everything. Karen's affair with Nathan, how they had been together for years behind my back. The look on their faces was pure shock. As expected, my mother immediately tried to defend Nathan. She refused to believe it. She said her precious boy would never do such a thing to his own brother. But I was determined to make them see the truth. I told them to stay silent while I called Nathan right in front of them. I wanted them to hear everything firsthand. I needed Nathan to think this was just a private conversation between us. Maybe then, he'd let his guard down. When he picked up, I didn't waste time. I confronted him directly about his affair with my wife. At first, he denied everything. But when I told him Karen had already admitted it, his attitude changed completely. He started blaming her, calling her immoral. And then, with that same cocky arrogance he always had, he laughed and said, "It's not my fault if women want me. I was always the more attractive brother." I clenched my jaw, but forced myself to stay calm. Then, I simply said, "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Nathan laughed again. "No one will believe you," he sneered. "I'm the golden child." I smirked. "Thanks for confirming everything," I said. Because the whole time our parents had been listening. Nathan went dead silent. Then panicked. He started stammering, scrambling for excuses, trying to backtrack. My mother, who had just been defending him, turned to him in pure disbelief. "Nathan, tell me this isn't true," she demanded. He mumbled something pathetic, trying to shift the blame onto Karen. But I could see it in my mother's face, the anger, the disappointment. For the first time in my life, she wasn't on his side. And that feeling of justice after all those years of torment, it was the most satisfying moment of my entire life. Nathan, the golden child, was finally exposed. His usual confidence crumbled. And then my father, who had always been the quiet, rational one, spoke. "Nathan," he said, his voice cold and stern, "what you did isn't just a betrayal of your brother, it's a betrayal of this entire family." My father never raised his voice, but the weight behind his words was crushing. "You slept with your brother's wife. You continued the affair even after they were married. And now, you expect us to just overlook that?" Nathan had nothing to say. My father shook his head. "I raised you both to understand the meaning of family, loyalty, and integrity. And today, you've shattered every value I ever tried to teach you." He let that sink in before continuing. "Your complete lack of respect for your own brother, your lack of guilt, it's disgusting. You didn't just betray him, you destroyed our trust in you." Then, he dropped the hammer. "I won't let this go unpunished." Nathan's head snapped up. "As of today," my father continued, "you are cut off. The college fund I saved for you? Gone. If you want to finish school, find your own way to pay for it. The money I've been giving you to support your lifestyle? That stops now." Nathan's mouth fell open. "You think being a man means having affairs with married women?" my father said. "Fine. Let's see how much of a man you are when you have to support yourself for once." Nathan freaked out. He started protesting, making excuses, saying it wasn't fair. But my father didn't care. He cut him off mid-sentence and ended the call. My mother, still stunned, turned to me. And for the first time in years, she hugged me. She apologized for never believing me, for always siding with Nathan, for failing me as a mother. I thought about my 14-year-old self, the kid who had spent years feeling like an outsider in his own family. And now, for the first time, I wasn't the one being ignored. After that, my father helped me hire a damn good lawyer to finalize my divorce. Karen and her lawyer tried everything to screw me over demanding alimony, arguing that since I made more money, I had to support her. But her affair? That worked against her. Then came the DNA test, and it confirmed what I had feared. Nathan was the father. I can't even describe the pain of hearing those words. It was worse than when Karen first admitted to cheating, worse than anything I had ever felt. Karen begged me to still be in the child's life. She said he shouldn't be punished for her mistakes, but I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at him, I saw Nathan. I hated it. When the divorce was finalized and I was finally free, I walked away. I moved into my own bachelor apartment. It felt strange living alone. I had married young, so I had never experienced life by myself before. But since I had always been independent, I quickly adjusted. And honestly, I loved it. 2 weeks ago, my father called. He told me he was rewriting his will. He wanted to make sure Nathan wouldn't inherit a single cent. If there's one thing to know about my father, it's that he's incredibly stubborn. He had made up his mind he wanted nothing to do with Nathan anymore. Nathan had tried reaching out to our parents. He had even shown up at their house, begging for forgiveness. But they wouldn't even let him through the door. Even my mother, who had always enabled him, seemed completely done with him. It probably hurt her the most, but even she had finally given up on him. But here's the thing, Nathan never apologized to me. Not once. So it was clear that he wasn't sorry for what he did. He was just upset that our parents had cut him off. Then my father dropped another bombshell. He told me that he was leaving everything to me. Not because I had asked for it, but because he wanted to guarantee that Nathan could never come back and try to claim anything later. He was leaving Nathan $1 a legal move to ensure he couldn't contest the will. I was shocked. My father had worked his whole life to build his wealth. Between his assets, retirement funds, and life insurance, the inheritance would total close to $2 million. The only condition? If my father passed before my mother, she would continue to live in their home, even though ownership would transfer to me. Of course, I had no problem with that. I wanted to take care of her until the very end. Then, somehow, Nathan found out, and since our parents ignored him, he called me instead. Yesterday, for the first time in months, my brother's name popped up on my phone screen. I let it ring a few times before picking up. I already knew what this was about. Nathan started with a sob story. He whined about how hard it was to pay for college. Then, he dropped the second bombshell after Karen found out that Henry was his biological son. She had started demanding child support. Nathan had no money. He was looking for side jobs, but nothing was working out. And then, he begged me to talk to our parents on his behalf. He wanted a second chance. He needed my help. I moved into my own bachelor apartment. It felt strange living alone. I had married young, so I had never experienced life by myself before. But since I had always been independent, I quickly adjusted. And honestly, I loved it. 2 weeks ago, my father called. He told me he was rewriting his will. He wanted to make sure Nathan wouldn't inherit a single cent. If there's one thing to know about my father, it's that he's incredibly stubborn. He had made up his mind he wanted nothing to do with Nathan anymore. Nathan had tried reaching out to our parents. He had even shown up at their house, begging for forgiveness. But they wouldn't even let him through the door. Even my mother, who had always enabled him, seemed completely done with him. It probably hurt her the most, but even she had finally given up on him. But here's the thing, Nathan never apologized to me. Not once. So it was clear that he wasn't sorry for what he did. He was just upset that our parents had cut him off. Then my father dropped another bombshell. He told me that he was leaving everything to me. Not because I had asked for it, but because he wanted to guarantee that Nathan could never come back and try to claim anything later. He was leaving Nathan $1 a legal move to ensure he couldn't contest the will. I was shocked. My father had worked his whole life to build his wealth. Between his assets, retirement funds, and life insurance, the inheritance would total close to $2 million. The only condition? If my father passed before my mother, she would continue to live in their home, even though ownership would transfer to me. Of course, I had no problem with that. I wanted to take care of her until the very end. Then, somehow, Nathan found out, and since our parents ignored him, he called me instead. Yesterday, for the first time in months, my brother's name popped up on my phone screen. I let it ring a few times before picking up. I already knew what this was about. Nathan started with a sob story. He whined about how hard it was to pay for college. Then, he dropped the second bombshell after Karen found out that Henry was his biological son. She had started demanding child support. Nathan had no money. He was looking for side jobs, but nothing was working out. And then, he begged me to talk to our parents on his behalf. He wanted a second chance. He needed my help. I laughed. Not just a chuckle. A full-blown laugh. Then I said, "You should have thought about all this before you slept with my wife and knocked her up." Nathan got defensive. He said I was being unfair, that Karen was just as guilty as him. I agreed. And I reminded him that I had divorced her. She was his problem now. So, if he was struggling with her or the baby, that was on him. He raised his voice, trying to argue, but I cut him off. I reminded him that he was no longer the family's golden boy. He was the disgraceful bastard who had slept with his own brother's wife. That was when he started crying. Nathan never cried, not since we were kids. He told me that every single relative, including our grandparents, had turned against him, but I didn't care. I told him we were done, that I was no longer his brother, and that he should never call me again. Since then, I've been replaying the conversation in my head. I won't lie, I hate my brother. But hearing him so helpless? For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. And that's why I'm here. Should I talk to my parents about him? Would I be an asshole if I didn't? Update 1. Hey everyone! A lot of you have been asking why I don't see Henry anymore. Some of you have even called me heartless. And I get it. But the truth is, I don't want to raise someone else's child. This isn't a case where I married someone who already had kids. I was lied to. I was forced to believe Henry was my son only to find out he was my brother's. Of course, it hurt like hell. I cried for days. But the reason I've cut Henry out of my life? Because I want nothing to do with Karen. And if I stay in Henry's life, Karen will always find a way to weasel back into mine. Call me selfish. Call me cruel. But right now I just can't do it. Maybe that will change one day. But for now, I need distance. Update 2. Most of you guessed correctly, my mother told Nathan about the will. That's why he called me. When I confronted her about it in front of my father, she broke down in tears. She told me that I had already punished Nathan enough, that he had learned his lesson. My father was furious. He told her that if she truly believed Nathan's betrayal was something we could forgive, then he couldn't live with her anymore. That he would never forgive Nathan. That if she ever spoke to Nathan again, and we found out, she would have to pack her bags and leave. That shut her up real quick. She knows my father never makes empty threats. I just hope she listens. Update 3. It's been 5 months since my last update. Things with my parents are better than ever. My father and I now play golf every weekend. Honestly, he acts more like a friend than a dad these days. My mother? I know she misses Nathan, but so far, she stayed away. The last I heard about Nathan, he and Karen are now living together. Nathan found a job. He works part-time as a mechanic. From what I hear, they're raising Henry together, which I guess is a good thing. I never bring up Nathan when talking to my parents, and they never bring him up either. For those wondering how I'm doing, I'm good. I got promoted at work 2 months ago, so my salary has increased significantly. I'm not dating anyone, yet I feel like I still need time. I've started seeing a therapist, so we'll see how that goes. But for the first time in years, I finally feel like I'm free. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe, leave a like, and have a great day.